Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm your host, Kyptan, and with me today is Befuddled Panda,
Hello.
Ashamon,
Hello.
and Dusty Strings.
Howdy.
Today we're going to be discussing The Player of Games, the 1988 science fiction novel by Iain M Banks, and the second published book in his Culture series. We'll be starting with some spoiler-free general impressions before we dig into the details, so I have to ask, Panda, how do you like Iain M Banks and Player of Games?
Okay, so I'll admit, I don't know why I had this impression that his books was just going to be very dense and that I was going to have to do a lot of hard work to really get through it. And that is just not the case.
Yeah, it's use of weapons.
Oh, well. That's true. I did read the first few pages of Use of Weapons and I was like, not in the mood. But this one was completely different. I was drawn in, I was intrigued, and I mean, it did take me a while to finish, but that's not because of the book. It's just because of my life. But once I was like, okay, no, I am here to finish this book, it went fairly quickly. So I enjoyed it.
Cool. Ashamon.
This is my second time reading it. It was better the second time. Yeah, so I'm not hugely enamored with the book. I think this is really good. I think it's really good sci-fi, particularly. Like Iain M Banks, Asimov #2 in this book, basically. All right, like the characters, meh. The story, meh. The world building and ideas, A+.
You didn't like the story?
The story, well,
okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
It's not a reason why I would read this book. I wouldn't, if I gave it to someone, I wouldn't be like, read this book, it has a really good story. No, the story is fine, it's serviceable, it's light, he's definitely not a bad writer here. But the reason you would read this, I think, is the world building and the ideas.
Okay.
Dusty, how about you?
Yeah, so second time reading it as well. Enjoyed it and still found myself really wanting to play this game without bets, obviously. So
What about
I don't know.
light bets?
Okay, I do light bets
Like a spanking.
Like Truth or Dare style.
I was thinking buy me a Coke.
That's boring.
But otherwise, yeah, I like this book.
Cool. As for myself, it's my third time going through. I really enjoy it. It's not my favorite Banks book. It's not my favorite Culture book. It's honestly in the middle for me. I think it's a pretty serviceable plot. I think the characters are ciphers for the politics and cultures that they're in.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And that's fine because it's under 300 pages, so who cares?
Mm-hmm.
It is almost 400 pages in my copy, okay?
My copy, it's 290 something.
Is yours super tiny print?
Mine's
Yeah,
309.
What's yours?
309 for me.
309, okay.
Yeah.
867 5.
4? What are we counting?
No, it's 867 5 309. He said 309, and the song popped into my head.
Jenny.
Oh, oh man.
Now it's in everybody's head who's listening.
What a boomer.
Okay.
Ouch.
I think it's about time for our first listener question from Huron Fan. What do you think the biggest inspirations for the Culture books are?
Oh.
Ashamon.
This book specifically, the Left Hand of Darkness and Foundation.
Okay. Panda.
I am not equipped to answer this question.
Okay, Dusty.
Oh, he means inspiration is in media or books?
Well, you could cite a philosopher if you wanted, whatever.
Mine was, and this would have been my inspiration, but without going too far into it, would have been the potential systems and what he was seeing in his country at the time.
Okay.
And wanting sort of like an Aaron Sorkin.
Okay, I think that's valid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't have to dig too deep into current political topics, but I will say that I think that one of the clear inspirations for this book is just the entire concept of empire.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As we explore the empire of Azad.
I would say that in addition to criticizing empire, it also criticizes authoritarianism, which aren't Like, it's a pedantic thing,
Sure.
but they're not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
The culture as a post-scarcity society has a lot to say about economics and scarcity. So
Oh, yes, they do.
we'll get there later. But can you think of any other like science fiction authors that really popped out at you when you were reading this, maybe? And what would you say is maybe the spiritual successor to the Culture series, if you know of one?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would say Navin for the orbital stuff.
Okay.
Mm,
Ringworld is definitely in
Ringworld.
there for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Spiritual successor.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that one of the spiritual successors for the Culture is the Halo universe.
Huh.
Interesting.
I think it's pretty clearly inspired by the Culture world.
I can see it. I can see what you're saying.
Yep. Especially the like Forerunner era stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it. They had really large institutions. The Halo rings themselves were built later and did not serve the same purpose that the culture's like
Yep.
rings would, their orbitals would, but they had other large orbitals, so I could definitely see that.
I could see.
And also, the Forerunners were living in a post-scarcity society.
True.
I could also see some of the early writers of Warhammer 40k looking at this and be like, okay, this is what makes a good world, and we're just gonna cancel this out.
Oh, yes, that's so true. That is the darkest universe.
Yep.
I don't think you can include this in a headline that says Elon Musk is inspired by Iain Banks' utopian sci-fi novels, but he doesn't understand them.
He named some of his rockets
Too
in the
good.
same naming convention.
The retrieval drone that's on the ocean is called the Of Course I Still Love You, which appeared in Player of Games.
Ah,
And there's another one that I forget, which is also in this book.
okay.
I don't know about this book, but my favorite one ever is the washing instruction ship for Life's Rich Tapestry.
I really enjoyed the limiting factor
Yeah.
as a bit of a cipher in this novel as well, and I have a crazy conspiracy theory about it, which I'm saving for the end.
Excellent.
Okay.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. So Panda's already answered this question, but Lady Sweden asked, did you get hooked on the story at once, or how long did it take you to get into it? Ash?
First time I read this, I slogged through because it was a book that was bought for me. I didn't get hooked at all. I appreciated the game. Besides that, I was like, this is fine. I don't really care. So I was never hooked. And then I read Use of Weapons and I was like, wow, this is excellent. Maybe I misjudged Player of Games. I'm not going to reread it now, though.
Dusty.
Yeah, so for me, I read in publication order. So I guess you could say that, yes, I was hooked on this one, but I opened Consider Phlebas and was hooked instantly and just kind of screamed through the series that year. So
My first time through, I did very much the same thing. I opened up Consider Phlebas and I was like, what is going on here? I like it.
Yep.
I like it quite a lot. I'm also confused. And then I got to
Oh,
Player
yeah.
of Games and I was like, oh, this is easy.
Agreed.
Player of Games was a breeze, and that really gave me a feeling of confidence to go forward with the rest of the series, which I did in short order.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will say, like, I was mostly intrigued by the world. The plot at the beginning was quite slow because there's a lot of setup. Like, you're getting to know the characters, getting to know, like, who this main protagonist is. And then things really started to pick up when he finally made the decision to go play this game, which I don't think is a spoiler. I mean, it's kind of the whole premise. So once that happened, it was like, okay, things are like getting more interesting.
He's kind of like Bilbo Baggins at the start, where he's just swimming in self-pity.
Yeah, there's some like non-spoiler reluctance at the beginning, and you know that it's reluctance, and you know it's going to go away.
Yes. It's like, can we just skip this, please? This isn't interesting.
Our main character is not super likable, honestly.
No.
Yeah, I like him in some ways. There's some things that I find interesting, and I like kind of trying to understand him later on in the book, but I do get what you mean.
Okay, let's dive into our spoiler part of the episode. Everybody ready?
Duh.
Cool. So, for a quick recap, player of game opens with Jerno Morat Gurga.
Let's go with Gurga.
I say Gurga.
Gurga? Okay. A celebrated games player feeling in a bit of a slump. At a local festival, he's tempted into a game with a young prodigy and seduced into cheating by his abrasive friend, the drone Maurin Skell. Skell blackmails him into working for Contact, which takes him on a 5-year trip to the Lesser Magellanic Cloud and the Empire of Azad, where he's enrolled as a non-binding foreign player. Against many expectations and covert and overt opposition, Gurgis succeeds through the tournament, playing brilliantly, eventually defeating the Emperor Regent and thus proving culture supremacy in the language of Azad. So,
Boom.
Huron asks, not a question, but I'd like you all to discuss the characterization Banks employs. What do folks have to say about the characters specifically in this novel? And we have a question from Eon Zero asking, who were your favorite characters in the player of games, and why were they the drones?
Yeah.
But that's a culture series in general. Why are the drones so dope? I love Scaphanatiska.
Scaphanamtiska? Yeah.
That's the one.
Which one is that?
A use of weapons.
Use of weapons.
Oh, yeah. Not. I liked the Hub the most. The Hub was my favorite character by far. It was not even close. I didn't like any other character besides like the limiting factor. Everyone else was dislikable. Like I just
You don't like Flair Imsaho?
this drone that's being intentionally shrill and annoying the entire time. No, I didn't like him.
Bird watching.
Yeah, he's going bird watching ostensibly.
Ostensibly.
Yeah.
So yeah, about how Banks does characters. It really works for me because he shows you a lot of character actions. He shows you some character thoughts, and there's a clear understanding that they are not necessarily the majority of character thoughts or even necessarily the dominant or driving forces in their minds. They're just the conscious thoughts that the characters are having.
And
Mhm.
not necessarily even the thoughts that they're having, because
Oh no, yeah.
like in the end of this book, Maurin
Most
Skell
of it is not.
Yeah, I made a lot of these up.
Yeah. Well, I even in that middle, I guess it's middle late section where Gerger like starts watching like the late night horror fest stuff.
Yeah. You're just like wondering.
Yeah, I'm like, what's going on with this guy? Like, is he into this? Is he just trying to get in their mind? Like, it's just really confusing and kind of just like Banks is just sort of like leading you to like kind of guess sometimes.
My interpretation of that is that he's furious, but also entranced by stuff that's foreign to him.
Mm-hmm.
But then it starts to cross a line where he's no longer thinking in Moraine. And even though he knows how backwards empires are from his society's perspective and from his own, but just watching those broadcasts for long enough has made him start talking in the propaganda of the empire.
Mm-hmm.
And start thinking that way. And that I think was a fascinating little note for us to get through the implicit characterization there. Though it's a little heavy-handed when Flair Imsaho tries to get him to start talking Moraine again.
Yeah.
That wasn't Banks' most subtle point.
No. And speaking of inspirations, definitely an echo of 1984 there with the Newspeak.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Obviously the direct opposite. This is the ideal language for humans. Whatever that means. I don't even know what that means. We'll just have to trust the minds.
Language as a moral weapon and proud of it.
Yeah. This feels very 80s and 90s language theory, right? Like it is. I think it's been established that language does impact the way that you think, but
The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Yeah, I think it's been walked back a bit, where it's like it's not as huge as it's conveyed to be here.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work after that in people who don't think in language about modes of thought that don't involve a written or spoken language at all.
Huh. I think it'd be cool if we all could learn all the possible phonemes when we're really young. Phonemes, who I can't pronounce sometimes.
Phonemes.
And then phonemes, sure. And then later on in life when you had to learn a new language, you could actually hear that stuff. But I get what you guys are talking about. It's a completely different thing.
Did you like that the culture has just one genderless pronoun that they use in all instances, and then like a couple scientific ones that they don't use in day-to-day conversation?
Yeah, it actually kind of makes sense though. I mean, because it kind of goes into language, like even here. So in Vietnam, something that people do a lot is when they refer to themselves, instead of saying I, like us, which again, not necessarily a gendered pronoun, but they'll say their name. So it took me a couple of years to realize that not everyone was a Pokemon when they're saying their name.
My goodness, Dusty.
I mean,
hilarious.
third person, Kyptan thinks is a totally valid method of speaking, but
Yes, it throws you off.
I'm probably in favor of their single genderless pronoun. I'm on record as not like loving they them, because I think it's like it conveys a little bit too much ambiguity. But yeah, in this hypothetical dialect, I assume whatever pronoun they have sounds great and isn't ambiguous at all.
in this hypothetical conlang, yeah.
Especially when like they can change their gender, so they
Yeah.
could be in transition at any given point in time, and so just having a genderless pronoun like makes sense.
Yeah,
It does.
because you don't want to have to keep track of what your friends are
Yeah.
doing
That'd be so exhausting.
when they're away for
So
5
true.
years. Like, how do you tell that story if they're three different
my
genders
God.
over the trip?
Yeah.
You fathered 2 children and mothered 3 more? What's going on?
That's mildly scandalous in the culture to have more than 2 kids.
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and it's not even like it's a hard limit. It's just like they'll just think of you a little bit disapprovingly.
It's like, oh, they must really like being a mother or whatever.
Pregnant. Or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just like being pregnant. It's fine.
It just, I mean, hey, I've heard it's quite the experience.
There's a glow.
I mean, I'm sure it would be better in the culture with their medical care and their genofixing.
Yes.
And just not having to do anything besides just be pregnant happily.
Yeah.
And I have to pay for the bills.
Yeah.
Yep.
No bills, no concerns, and you can teleport anywhere you want. It's fine.
But your toddler's still going to pull everything off the bookshelf.
Yeah. Well, if you get tired of the toddler, you can just like give them up and you can know that they'll just have a fantastic life.
Yeah, this drone can raise them.
Yeah.
It's a fun world. Where do people think that if they were a culture citizen, what would you spend your time doing? What would you try and find your purpose in, / where would you live?
Oh, man.
I would absolutely be playing one of their role-playing games just 24/7. Well, sorry, I would sample many of them, and then I would play board games like Gurga. And that's my ideal existence right there.
Would
Where
you be
would you do
writing
that?
papers as well? Like
Writing
publishing
papers?
academic papers?
Maybe. Yeah, that sounds fun, right?
Would you find a university on an orbital somewhere? Would you find a traveling GSV that had a large contingent of game players? Would you?
I think I would want to live on one of Ye's flights. But a GSV would also be great.
Cool. Panda?
Yeah, I would indulge in all my interests and hobbies and throw wonderful parties all the time. That's what I would do.
And of course, it goes without saying that just like everyone just participate in orgies all the time.
The orgy part is probably something I won't opt into, but who knows?
Maybe on holidays.
Would you voluntarily contract illnesses?
Oh, no. No.
I don't.
No.
Okay, like
No.
if
You want to try out what influenza's like?
No.
if I had the like experiences and understanding of our world, but I am living in the culture's world, then no, I would not voluntarily contract illnesses. But if I didn't know anything better and I was just like really curious, then maybe.
I mean, you just hit the issue of like, I don't know what I'd be doing because I'd like to live on a planet because I mean, orbitals are cool, but I still planets. But it seems like everybody in the culture thinks that's kind of strange. So I just don't know. Like maybe I'd be playing board games, or maybe I'd just be reading a lot of books, or finding ancient construction toys, or from different civilizations that I could play with. But I really don't know what I would be doing.
You'd be hiking, finding all the hikes, and then you would write books about all those hikes.
Okay, well, there we go.
You'd be yelping all the hikes in the culture.
Culture
Maybe
Yelp.
you'll become a tour guide for hikes on planets.
And preferably dangerous ones or ones with empires.
Okay.
I did really like that Gurga in his like house at Ikro, they had just like people would wander by on hikes and he'd host them for a night or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'd love for that to be a more viable social opportunity in my current life, but like, you can't just do that here.
Isn't that what
You
couch
can't be
surfing is?
guaranteed. Yeah.
I mean, kind of, but it's couch surfing is like arrangements and agreements between people mediated via an internet app. He just had people walk up to his house, say hi, and he was like, "Hey, spend the night."
Yeah. Like,
That's true.
the reassurance of not having to worry about your safety or your possessions. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of small town America for me sometimes.
That's true.
He did have to worry about his lawn with Ye's friends, though.
like worry.
There were houses in my town that were kind of like that. I guess you still mostly knew everybody, but it was one of those things where it was like, oh, who do you know? Because I don't know you. Because we like go to people's houses and just show up and just stay and hang out and stuff. 'Cause I was in a small town, so it was sort of like that. But yeah, the general safety thing, probably not quite the same.
But like a total stranger just walking up to your door, not from your town, not from your area, just like people on a hike by your house. You bring them in, you feed them, which again, even just feeding someone food is not the labor struggle that it would be when you have an automated house.
Yeah.
That is true.
And yeah,
True.
like you only need to actually do any work if you want to do the work. You can just get a drone to do it.
You can say, Hub, hey, I want some roast beef.
Yeah.
And some fully ethical roast beef will pop up on your table.
Alexa, I want some roast beef.
Alexa's not at the same.
I'd just be chatting with the Hub all day. The Hub sounds excellent to talk to.
Yep.
Yeah, you just have to have something interesting enough that you get to talk to Hub entire.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting enough for a supercomputer, so like nothing a human could really comprehend.
I actually, when reading this the second time or the third time around, I started fixating on all of the little objects that are assigned sentimental value throughout especially the earlier part on the Hub on Chiark. So the little game piece things from the possessions set. Another game piece that he gives away to the child who's on the hike with their parent. The clothing that he's in when Maurin Skell assaults him, he immediately burns it when he gets back into the house. And the sentimentality, but also the disposability of objects really appealed to me as a manifestation of how the post-scarcity society changes things, just on your relationship to objects. Anybody have something that they wish they could destroy because of its association with bad memories, but it's too expensive to do away with?
Absolutely. A scarcity society.
Oh, I was about to say that.
Okay, you two be quiet.
They broke the question.
Whoops.
I don't think I have anything like that. No.
Like maybe you were in a bad like in a bad car crash and you just wish you could not look at the steering wheel that you were stuck in while the paramedics tried to rescue you.
My life
Was
is
that
not
yours?
that tragic.
No, that's not mine. I've never had a car crash like that, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely less pro cars than I was before my car crash. So yeah, I guess like if I could do away with just cars, but that's like a societal thing. Specific objects, I actually can't think of any.
got some skis that betrayed me once. But they're very expensive, so I just fixed them up and I'm like, hey, I hope you don't break on me again.
Oh.
Please don't destroy my body anymore.
Nothing.
I can't think of anything.
Well, okay, I guess a real thing would be like probably common, like people's relationship with their own bodies. Like in the culture, you can just change it to whatever you want.
Oh,
And,
that is true. That is true.
You just kind of have to learn to live with yours. You do some small modifications, but nothing as drastic as like changing your sex entirely, or I don't know. I assume you just like grow to whatever height you want in the culture.
I mean, I'd definitely get rid of like my bad back if I could, but
Mhm.
Aches and pains, yeah.
Yeah, I would make my legs a bit longer. Yep. And I mean, it's incredible because, like, just thinking, one of the things that really struck me about the culture world is just like how imaginative Banks is. Like, he really doesn't put that much like restrictions and constraints on where he takes these creatures and the world, and it's just like whatever he can think of, like, and as long as it like makes sense in this in
Yeah.
the context of what you're reading, he does it, like growing back different limbs and the drug glands, all of that. It's just like it was all very refreshing to me because a lot of the things that I read is very it's still very much rooted in our reality, even if there is like magic or sci-fi. It's just not as creative. And this was like truly creative to me.
there's a lot of freedom in the technology level of the culture.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's doing transhumanism taken to one of its logical extremes. I get the sense that he talked to like a couple biologists before he wrote this and was like, okay, tell me about design flaws. And like we find out later that like the culture is like radically reworked the plumbing of the human body.
Yep.
Right.
They're like, well, if they actually took your genitals, we'd have to destroy them because they're state secrets.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
So we're going to interfere either way. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't want to lose your genitals, we're going to have to interfere if you lose this bet. But if you don't care about it and you do, we're still going to have to interfere.
Right.
Yep. And
Right.
he could just turn off his pain receptors.
Yeah.
If he gets
Yeah.
castrated.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds pretty nice.
I think there was a question from listeners about like in a post scarcity world, like would that be boring or like what is there? What was that
So
question?
Toure asked, can a post-scarcity and near-utopian society and literature avoid being boring without neighbors on a lower level?
Oh. Because they're trying to say, like, if you don't know what you're missing, then you're going to get bored.
Like if there's no contrast, I guess, and
Right.
also like would there be conflict? Because one of the things that makes the story interesting is that there is this conflict happening.
I think humans are just going to be dissatisfied with with themselves regardless, unless you rework the brain, which maybe the culture has done that for a lot of people.
Personally, I
Mhm.
think that yes, you absolutely can. And I would point to the Hydrogen Sonata, which has barely any discussion of lower tech level neighbors.
Yup.
But also, I would point to romance novels, which rarely have this huge world shaking or socio-political conflict in it. No, they're interpersonal conflicts at the core.
Yeah.
And there's no reason you can't have interpersonal conflicts in the culture. In fact, we see a bunch of them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and well, I was just thinking on the lines of too of like, I guess if you look at it, each one of us could say that we are happy because there's an absence of sadness in some ways. But I just did a thing this week talking about gratitude with my students at Thanksgiving, and whenever I practice that idea of gratitude, I feel a lot better, and my thinking shifting to like being happy. And my gratitude isn't focused on the idea of, well, it could be this. It's usually focused on things like, I'm just thankful that I've got family, or I'm thankful that I've got this water bottle that I really like, which, by the way, Panda is the water bottle you gave to me years ago. My students thought that was hilarious. So I guess I can understand, but if in this society, if with the technology they have, and like you mentioned, like the bioengineering they have, I think that it could be more of that. Like everything is focused on the good, and so that like goodness, for lack of the better word, suddenly is just what the society is. And so nobody's worried about like, oh, maybe there could be something worse. So I'm glad I have this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also we see before Azad came into the picture, right? For example, Ye also had like frustrations, even though she's part of this utopian society. She was like, she wants to design, landscapes her way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But no, these other people want her to design something else. And there was like a part where I am gonna butcher the name. The little bot that blackmails Gerge.
Marin Skell?
Yeah, that one, Marwin Skell. So in that section where it's starting to blackmail Gerge, there's a section that says some people use such machines just for fun or revenge, making up stories where appalling or just funny things happen to their enemies or their friends. Where nothing could be authenticated, blackmail became both pointless and impossible. In a society like the culture, where next to nothing was forbidden and both money and individual power had virtually ceased to exist, it was doubly irrelevant. The machine really must be mad. It's like he just described like in the society, like blackmail, there's no point in it.
Yep.
But yet the whole
There's still a point for
premise,
Gerge.
yeah, the whole
Yep.
premise is like the blackmail is what drove
Yep.
him.
Yep.
So I think there still is. It wouldn't be boring. Yeah.
If you've got a special circumstances almost quality drone around, you can be blackmailed.
Mm.
I should probably clarify what I said earlier. I think the culture is undoubtedly a better society than anything we have, and people would generally be much happier, right? Like, I don't think anybody who's had horrible things happen to them, like truly horrible things, would say like, yes, my life is better for, I don't know, like having my child die on me. No one would say that.
Right.
So just like
Yeah.
having a potential for a culture where you just don't have to deal with that, absolutely, that's much better.
To be fair to the culture, it is not perfect.
Correct.
No.
We see an example towards the end of the book where at Tron's there was a mistake with the fireworks and a couple people died.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But didn't they get brought back?
No.
That was not stated.
Okay.
And you can only be brought back in the culture if you agreed to have a backup. And even then, philosophically, is that still you?
Aha, identity issues.
Yay.
Yeah, and then you have the Empire of Azad, where like it's very much a dominance-based hierarchy, which is not something the culture has. So, like, I guess if you're of the belief that humans need hierarchies and human existence is about climbing to the top and then oppressing those below, then yeah, you'd probably be unsatisfied with the culture. But then I would have questions about your ethics.
Psychohistory.
I like the flat-out refutation of psychohistory in this book, in that it says, no, there's too many chaotic events in every millisecond of every day. We can't predict things that far in advance. We can only get generalities, and we can get our best efforts with active guidance.
Yeah, he kind of bakes in non-determinism to his universe.
Yeah, I meant more like the idea of like in the culture, they might have had to change the entire society's psychology in order to move into this state first, if you know what I mean. Because there's another book that does mention that the culture, the peoples of the culture used to have wars. So
yeah. And there was, in another book, there's reference to eras where the minds were not as trusted as they are now, back when they were first being developed. Ture also asks, is the culture a true utopia? I'm definitely going to be bringing that up at the end.
Okay.
Ture asks, is the culture a true utopia?
Do you want to wait to the end to mention that, or do you want to talk about it now still?
We can talk about that at the end, I guess, as well. That can be something we end on.
Okay. Before you move on to a different one, okay. Flair Imsaho.
Yeah.
And the one, I always want to call him Scafanatiscara. That's not his name.
Marwin Skell.
Marwin Skell. Okay.
Yeah.
I say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is why I like Flair Imsaho.
Yeah, pretty definitively told to us. Okay, I do have qualms with this book. I don't think this book is perfect. and I do not give it a 5 stars. One of the things that I did not enjoy about the way the story was told is this like narrator that just like explains all this stuff to you. It felt very jarring, and I was like, the attitude, it's like it's a very snarky narrator, and I mean, I didn't guess it before it was revealed to me like who the narrator was, but I also didn't care. Like the way that the story started, if I had only just read like the first few paragraphs and I didn't keep going, I would be like, I don't like this book because I did not like this whole like directly talking to the reader, and like also when they were trying to explain the genders of the Azad Empire, I was like, you're actually making this even more confusing to me. So I just completely ignored it anyway. That was one of my least favorite parts of this book.
So you didn't like the translator notes about pronouns?
No.
Okay.
That was confusing.
I thought it was overly expository.
Yeah.
Like it's coming from like reading Malazan, which is so hard in the other direction. I just don't trust my impressions. I'm just like, oh man, why won't any author write like Steve and just like not give me any information directly?
I'm not gonna lie, that thought did come to my mind when I was reading it. I was like, this is too direct.
Yeah.
Can you just like remove this, please?
Great. So the Malazan team is saying Iain M Banks is too direct.
At least for this
That's pretty
book.
funny.
This book. Great. So remind me of that when we get to use of weapons.
Okay.
And consider Phlebas.
And inversions.
Oh, and inversions.
Yeah. So like he does have an out in that like Maren Skell clearly thinks that we the reader are stupid and is over explaining there. But yet like it doesn't make it more pleasant to read, right?
I thought it read like discussion points in like a reading club version of a book almost.
A little bit, yeah.
Notice how the culture doesn't have pronouns or doesn't have gender
It's just
pronouns.
like,
Think
okay.
about that, reader. Discuss with your friends.
Which we did.
Does Gergen know what's going on yet? Does he have a suspicion that he's being maneuvered?
It was like one of those game shows or like narrators on a TV series, like, and dear viewer, da-da-da. I'm just like, get out of here.
I mean, this book is from the 80s.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
true.
I don't think that's an excuse.
I liked it. I liked the little snarky AI talking about how he's maneuvered Gerget or not. Which I think not, honestly.
Oh, interesting. I thought he was manipulating him and like obviously manipulating him.
I think part of Gerget knew what was going on and maybe didn't tell his entire consciousness, but was along for the ride on purpose.
Maybe. The scene that comes to mind here is like when Gurk is like, oh, I was invited to this party, and then Flair Imsaho is like, oh, you shouldn't go to that party. It's too dangerous. You can't do it. I forbid it. And then Gurk is like, well, screw you, man. I'm going to the party. Yeah, like it's just like obviously he's being manipulated by Flair Imsaho right there, and like I don't see why Gurka would go along for the ride there, but
because he's very invested in being a curmudgeon. And he needs reasons to not be a curmudgeon. And they need to be consistent with his public persona.
I see. Very Jungian shadow self stuff going on here.
Okay, you'll appreciate this, Ash. What this makes me think of is, and again, going back to Malazan, is like the contact is being like the errant is just like giving Gergate the nudges needed.
Absolutely.
To get to the outcome.
Yeah, at one point the Flair Imsaho was like, oh, you're playing at a level too high for the ship's AI. It had some guesses, but oh my, even it was lost there.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it wasn't.
And Gergo's like, he had expected better of the ship.
Well, but that's kind of nice. They're like sort of letting him grow. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
like,
they're being too obvious about it.
But maybe he realized, I don't know, I really don't know. I kept trying to think of like how I would be with Gurga, and it reminded me of my college years when suddenly I'm learning all these things, and I'm like, was everything a lie? I don't know anymore. And so like that was kind of like my thoughts of maybe he's like looking at all this stuff, and some of those things are going through his head. So he's being manipulated, but at the same time, he's like, I don't know, along for the ride, just growing a little bit and having fun and kind of figure himself. So. I'm not saying college manipulates you. That's not what I just said.
That is what I heard.
That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say like you just start learning all these new things and that you don't really know what to do with them or where to put them in your carefully ordered world structure.
They manipulate you into thinking it's worth the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, I do have another qualm with this book. Like, I get it that Banks doesn't need to give like enough details so that you can really understand how the game as that is played. Like, he gives you enough information about, there are these kinds of moves, there are like these different boards, different games, and this is like generally how it works. But the whole time I was reading this, I felt like there was a piece missing for me where it was like, I get it. Like, you're each making these moves and you're telling me that so-and-so is like moving ahead and they have this strategy and blah, blah, blah. But it just felt so vague and like conceptual to me.
It's just the high level commentary.
Exactly. And I was just, I did not feel very connected, did not feel very like invested in like what was actually happening in the game. The only thing that I could really connect with was how Gurge was reacting to what was happening, because that was the only like concrete thing that was given to me. I guess how Gurge was reacting and then like the consequences for the people that he was playing against. But like I wanted to know more about the game because I wanted to be like more invested. Like I want to be invested as much as Gurge is invested. It just felt like I'm just on the sidelines, like watching somebody play, which I guess is what's happening. But it would have been a much more satisfying and immersive reading experience if I could have been more like in Gurge's shoes.
That's funny. I thought of it differently. I get what you mean, but like I kind of looked at it as like, okay, this game is the most complicated board game ever. It combines every board game ever made, plus Dungeons and Dragons, plus philosophy. And so like I was like, okay, I don't expect to get much out of it. But that's why the parts that I did, it was just so interesting to kind of make those connections of this game is so connected with their society, like these philosophies and these histories are coming into it. And yeah, they were still vague, but I found that really fun and interesting as we get into it, even though that stuff intrinsically the way that we would if we lived in the society.
Yeah, I think it's pretty impossible to give any sort of concrete lower down examples of play without bogging this book down into unreadability.
Like I get that, and that's why I'm like, I understand why it's written that way, but the consequence of it is, for me as the reader, it was more distant of a reading experience.
There's honestly not that many sequences of actual gameplay that make up this book.
Well, the thing is, like, they keep talking about points, right?
Which does make you wonder about what the focus of the book is, and it's not the mechanics of the game.
No, it's not the mechanics of the game. It's like what the game represents, but because the tension that is being built is through what is happening in the game. And they talk about points, who's gaining points, who's losing points. Oh, it's a marginal win. I'm like, but I don't really understand how points are given. Like, how difficult was it for him to get the points? It just like it seemed a little inconsistent where it's like, oh, he was so far behind, but then he had these brilliant plays that then propelled him to win. And I'm just like, this seems like a bit of a cop out.
They did give more reason than just like he made some brilliant plays. They did generally discuss the situations between him and the other players that led to that happening. Like, oh, he played off of a stalemate of these people, or there was a rivalry between the two branches of the military which allowed him to coast to victory in this one, or he transitioned his thought patterns from empire to culture, and that's how he came back in his final battle.
Like, I get that.
Have the same problem as Panda.
And I think I'm just going to mention two questions that we got. One from Ture, which was, barring the physical penalties, would you play Azad? Does it sound like an actual playable game, and could a human brain play it? And Coding Fu, we already discussed this, but what did Azad look like? To me, I imagine a cross between Go and Warhammer with side games of Pokemon and Settlers of Catan.
I can see that, yeah.
My answer to all of those questions about, like, can it be played? Can a human, like, no.
Yeah, the description was much too nebulous for me to get any grasp on what this might look like.
Yeah.
So in my head, it was just like, okay, they're playing on a board. I guess the board looks like a chess board, and none of these moves make sense in a chess context at all. I'm just not going to think about it.
The board represented terrain. They
Yes.
did make a show of there being like 3-dimensional terrain being represented on the board.
Yeah, and the pieces are like bio pieces,
Some
and they have
of the
weird
pieces are bio
interactions.
pieces.
They can change.
And to that I say, "Bleh," that gives me nothing. He's pretending to exposit things, but there's nothing there.
Yes.
Like, this is just a smoke screen. All we know for sure about the game is that there are sub games and there are 3 boards, and that's it.
Right.
Oh, and the themes of the board.
Yeah.
The board of origin, form, and becoming. So past, present, and future.
Why it's so jarring for me, and like why I have so much qualms about the actual game, is Banks details. Like, he provides a lot of details about the world, about a lot of other things, and then when it comes to the game, it is very vague. So it's very striking how, like, the lack of details given to about the game, like, is to me.
To me, that was the reason he did it. So Azad is a game that literally has created this empire and this culture. So the vagueness of the game, I don't know, maybe I started just putting in points that he took from Azad. I don't, you guys keep saying it differently, so I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing Azad.
I don't know how it's supposed to go.
I don't know, but it was sort of like, that is the game. The culture is the game, and everything that Gurga sees outside of it like falls into that. And I totally get what you mean in the actual like game sequences and stuff. But I started just placing the ideas in there, and so Gurga got better with like the bio ones because he started to understand Zod's empathy or lack thereof, and had sympathy. And so those pieces made more sense because of the culture that he was starting to immerse himself into.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was like at the very end where Nikosar, the emperor,
Yeah,
like made the game real, right? And that's where I was
Emperor
like,
Regent.
yeah,
Mhm.
the Emperor Regent, where I was like, okay, I can like start to like understand, because then that's when they actually like, and he put a fire tile on an existing water tile, right?
Yeah.
And here's the consequence. And like, okay, now I'm getting like a better idea of like what they've been doing for all these pages.
Mhm.
And to me, it's even unclear how big the boards are. I don't know. Maybe this was explained.
That
But,
that was actually pretty fairly laid out.
Was it?
Like pretty
How big are the
exactly.
boards?
Yeah. They're like over 100 feet long.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
No, but that was only one board, wasn't it? Wasn't like
that
the
was one
origin
board.
board like small, like you said, like you'd be playing like Pokemon instead?
I think the great boards were all the same size, and then there were the sideboards, which were various sizes. I do remember it being laid out earlier on in the book.
I think that humans could play it.
Okay. As far as describing other things, I think he describes some things in a lot of detail, and then other things that you would expect to be described aren't. Like, what do the people of the culture actually look like? It's super unclear here. We know that they're super different from humans. And I'm not sure what the people of Azad look like, even.
They're very pale.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how compatible they are with humans, and how that would even be a thing.
So this is really dumb.
All we know is that they're pale.
Sometimes I don't read descriptions well, and so I put an image of something there that isn't at all what it was. So the Azadians all have like badger-like or skunk-like heads to me because of the one description about hair. I don't know why I do this, but I had to really read through to like not look at them that way. It's like something they're like for Red Ball for me. So
they're big bad badger moles.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
But they're pale.
But they're that's amazing. I love that.
Oh my god.
I just have an association with them with red and black because those are the colors of Empire in my mind.
Interesting.
I'm going to answer Torto's questions. Yes, I would play AZ. It does sound like a human brain could play it.
Mm-hmm.
As described, I don't think we have anything near enough information. And to answer Coding Foo's question, I imagine it like a giant game of Civilization.
Yes, I could see that.
I would probably play it, but I'm a sucker for board games. I guess maybe like the closest analog we have to this is the super heavy war games that have been designed and no one plays, like the campaign for North Africa, which takes literal months of your life, and you should have like an entire team of people that you can delegate. Like, oh, this is my captain, this is my general, this is my lieutenant,
my chief logistics officer.
Yep, this is my chief food officer.
Yeah, no.
Don't things purposefully come in quantities that don't match up with each other? So like gasoline comes in tanks that don't perfectly fill a tank or an armored vehicle, and there's always some like leftover, and so you need to have like these arrangements of gasoline to armored unit sizes, but that's like strategically unviable, and so you just need to accept that there's going to be some gasoline wastage.
Yeah, like no one actually plays these games except for like officers training in militaries, I think.
Yeah, and there's the real life classic example is the number of hot dogs in a package and hot dog buns in a package.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I think you have to like keep track of like empty water bottles or something in your army.
Oh man, yeah, it sounds right.
Yeah, this game does not sound very appealing to me. Thank you.
It takes months. Literal months.
I'd play it once.
You guys are masochists.
Thank you.
Strategy though.
Is it masochist or is it just that our own personal form of joy?
Well, I mean,
an achievement.
They're not mutually exclusive.
It's
true.
When you completed your culture name, would you pick a name that said, I completed the campaign for Northern Africa?
No.
Would they have a word for that in Moraine, the perfect language?
Yeah, probably.
Yes.
Mine will be, I read the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yeah, you'll have earned that at the end. Moraine, I think it's just German, right? They just updated German. So they can just stick words together and make bigger words.
They had to add things in like in Firefly when all the curses are in Mandarin.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Speaking of language, I got a kick out of Flair Imashol, that guy.
Flair Imsaho?
Flair Imsaho.
Flair, I'm such a hoe.
And Gurge, where Gurge was like speaking to that one Azadian officer dude.
And you just said like babble babble.
And he was like capacity and like asking the AI to translate. And then the AI was just like wibbly wobbly, giving gibberish and like, you know what you're doing. You're trying my patience.
Moraine is a state secret.
Yeah.
They would become too powerful if they could hear our language.
It was so funny.
It might set off the revolution too early.
Yeah. The minds have calculated that the optimal time for revolution is not now. It is 10 seconds from now.
Yeah. So we had this question from Murph, 1976. How do you feel about the culture manipulating not only other civilizations, but its own citizens to achieve ends in what might be called political games? Do you think Banks approves of these tactics?
I mean, the culture is ruled by essentially the Philosopher Kings, right?
Yes.
They are benevolent dictators. They are so superhumanly intelligent that there's probably no parallel, even even parallels in fiction are hard to come up with. Like these minds are so much, they're many orders of magnitude more intelligent than anything we know.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, they're the most qualified to make these political decisions. Why shouldn't they? Clearly, the people of Azad are not having a good time. I don't think it's. I don't think it would be ethical to just leave them to their misery, right?
They think at literal hyperspeed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultra
Right?
speed.
But it is that interesting concept with these AIs of like they're interested and they care about morality in societies and civilizations versus I've read a lot of sci-fi where people can't talk to AIs because they're so high above. There's no understanding. There's literally no bridge. They can't communicate. They can't understand each other.
Blind sight. It's blind sight, right?
Well, I was thinking of that one, but also, did you ever read Void Star?
Oh no.
Oh, in that there are AIs and they're like looking for them, but then like when they do find them or whatever or talk to them,
It's incomprehensible.
You can't tell an AI to do something because neither one of them understand each other. There's just orders of magnitude difference.
So somehow the culture has solved the alignment problem of AI, which is the biggest problem by far in AI besides just making them. So yeah, I mean, if you solve that problem, you're in for some smooth sailing.
And that is the key, is that the culture citizens are aligned with the culture minds in their value system. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have that trust, you can give up the cognitive powers to the minds. And you can just say, hey, you're better at this than I am. And you see Flair Imsaho do that about Moraine. He's like, even the like most rarefied of culture minds seem very proud of Moraine and very happy with it, and they wouldn't change it. And they know better than me, so I'm just going to accept it as fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think also, at least in this case, the culture wasn't going to just leave Gurge behind, right? Like,
no, they gave him a guardian.
Yeah, they would have stepped in and like protect him, and they did. I think though, what we kind of are given at the end, it's more like kind of brushed by is the effects of all these events on Gurge afterwards. Like, does he just really become kind of like a shell of a person, having gone through this like very intense experience? Like, what did the rest of his life look like? We're not really told. There's like some implication of what happened to him, but
yeah,
other
what
than
did you
that.
think of him being stored at the end? Just being put to sleep for 2 years.
Well, he wanted it, right? And I think he was just
he wanted
really
it,
tired. Like, I can't imagine just like being like at that level, because they all were also saying like that was like the most drugs like in his system ever. I would be like, he must be so tired.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then to have the crash and come down of winning the game of your lifetime, because he's convinced there's no game that compares to Azad in his eyes, and probably no player in the culture could invent a game like Azad out of scratch, because it's taken millennia pretty much for this game to coalesce into the form it has, and it took a barbarian culture to come up with it in the first place.
Right.
And so as far as he's concerned, that was the peak of his gameplay and lifestyle, or at least in a single game. And so to just have 2 years alone on a ship with no one else.
Yeah.
Though I guess he did hook up with a GSV on its way back, but still a significant portion would have been alone.
I would say that like that's kind of the best possible outcome that he could have had, right? Like he's gotten everywhere that he can go with games now. And the previous ennui that he felt like he wasn't being challenged in these games. And now he can have some closure. He's like, this is the chapter of my life that it can be done, and now I can figure out something else for myself. Whereas before, like I feel like he just would have been stuck, right? He would have been stuck in that rut basically forever otherwise.
Yeah, he didn't play another game like for 6 months or like ever, right afterwards. Yeah, he didn't need to anymore. And I think what's interesting is, so like at the beginning, right, the Ol's Hap, that girl that did the full web.
Who's now taking his job in professorship.
Right. And like
Yeah.
I would have thought, from the beginning of the book, I thought, when he got the news that she did achieve the full web, like he would have been so jealous. He would have been like really upset that like he wasn't the one because, he did try and blah blah blah. But like it didn't matter anymore. Like that full web was just like so minuscule compared to what he has been able to achieve in like the game that he was playing.
He won a game and destroyed an empire.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He finally grew up.
He finally grew up, and the whole plot seems so convenient for his character, right? Like he gets exactly what he needs, even if like he doesn't know that he needs it, and it like wraps up perfectly at the end. So
that's the culture for you.
And he got to see real suffering.
You got to see real suffering, yeah. And if I was a bit more cynical about the culture, like I would believe it's like, oh yeah, they've just found the situation for him, then they sent it in, and they had no intention of dealing with this culture, so they just were looking out for the happiness of one of their citizens. Which
I mean, they apparently waited for
70 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chambliss, he was saying this like, oh, I wasn't sure if this was, I think it was Chambliss, this was something that the Mayans had just contrived for you. So like it was presented as a possibility in the book, but like it was eventually discounted.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, like at one point they're saying that like, oh, we could do something about this, but it would be a drain on our resources. And even though we're post scarcity and resources don't matter, it would be kind of obnoxious.
Well, they were talking about invading the entire empire and occupying it and reforming it.
Yeah.
Like by force. And that's not a culture thing to do.
Yes. It would be a big expenditure of resources and cause some significant amount of suffering. And yeah, that's just aesthetically unpleasing to us.
Yeah. The culture is not an occupying army.
Yeah, it's sort of like if they have to do that, they feel like they've lost, which is explored in other books in the culture when they talk about some of that stuff. The last ditch effort is anything of like armed conflict. So
yeah, unless it's against something non-sentient.
Hey, yep.
Him bye blindside aliens.
Yeah, I guess they would just get wiped off the face of the universe.
What I didn't understand was Chambliss, that drone.
Yeah. Do you think Chambliss was in on it?
No, I don't think Chambliss was in on it. But Chambliss's reaction to the remnants of Marwyn Skell, like it seemed like she was very emotional about Marwyn Skell no longer being there. So
spite is a powerful force.
Yes.
Well, I mean, like that's why I don't think that Chambliss was involved either, because I feel like they would have known.
I think a multi-thousand-year-old drone is probably pretty good at play acting.
You think so?
Especially when all you have to do is change your aura color.
You think they were in on it?
I think there's a possibility. I don't think Banks gives an answer one way or another, but I think there's a distinct possibility that they had a lot of fun play acting with each other and like contriving the scenario that they hated each other. And then Chambliss was the one who convinced Gurga that, there's a potential for blackmail. It can happen. You can have this, and gave him the resources to search for it and convince himself that
okay, you're right.
This is a real scenario.
Okay.
And like all through the story, Chambliss is like sort of a doddering old drone. Kind of, not that Alfred is doddering, but Chambliss gave me strong Alfred vibes.
Chambliss also
disappeared
at a couple key moments right before Marwyn Skell showed up, or right before a contact drone showed up, or.
And I think Chambliss is also the one to suggest contact in the first place.
Yes. Chambliss was.
Yes.
You're probably not interested, Master Gurga, but I could put you in contact with these people.
Wow. Okay. All right. I'm convinced.
And now we're going to have the question from Lady Sweden. How does the experience of reading this book change upon reread?
I see.
And then we're going to be combining this with Felice Herrenfan, who asked, "At what point did you figure out how it would end?" And what I'm going to say is, I thought he was going to win the first time reading through the whole time. I was like, okay, he's going to win because that's how these books usually go.
That's accurate.
Yeah, I never had the impression that he was going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he's going to win and the whole castle's going to be burned down around them because the Emperor started a fire break an hour earlier and has killed everyone else. And the only reason he's going to survive is because he was in the fetal position protected by a force field.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't call that.
That one I didn't either.
That whole thing felt telegraphed to me,
But I will say that I'm going to have a quote here. One sec. He had lost control of his own drug glands. The mix of chemicals in his bloodstream had taken over, and his brain felt saturated with the one encompassing idea. And then later on, after the game was finished, he said he felt it relaxing his grip on him, something relaxing his grip on him. And I have a theory that the limiting factor was mind controlling him from light years away.
What?
With its hyperspace effectors, and was actually guiding him through the game playing and towards the culture's proposed and ideal outcome. And that the drug glanding and the brain chemicals that he was on distracted Gurga or made it imperceptible for him to notice that his thoughts were being affected.
Oh my god.
Though I do really like the idea of a drug gland system that builds its own feedback loop, which removes itself from conscious control. I do really like that idea because it mimics what actually happens when the brain is experiencing a serotonin storm.
Mm-hmm.
And some other things like epilepsy. I found some nice biological realism in that, but I also just have to wonder at a warship that hid its weapons and has the full capability to influence electrochemical signals from light years of distance away.
I really like the tinfoil hat you constructed here.
Yes.
I don't buy it. But yeah, sure.
I'm not saying it's what the story is saying. I'm not saying it's what Banks intended, but I do think that it's the tinfoil hat that some characters in the Culture universe have constructed.
Oh, yeah.
And that it's up to reader interpretation. How absolutely dystopian this world is.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's really funny how the Culture...
Oh, sorry. I had one more note. The limiting factor, its name.
Mm-hmm.
The limiting factor for Culture operatives is always going to be their intelligence on the ground. And with a ship in orbit providing a mind's level of intelligence, it can remove that from the equation.
Oh, Banks was telling us the entire time. We were just too foolish to see it. I find it really funny how early in the book, there's this diatribe about Gurga is reading from one of his essays. He's like saying that deterministic systems are the product of inferior minds, basically. Like, oh, games like chess, they're solvable, and that's bad. But like the Culture is very much playing a game with Gurga as their piece. And
yes.
Like, at what point does it become meaningful to say that
Gurga is a bioform?
Like, they knew he was going to win. They knew he was good. Like, there was no real chance of him losing. Like, Mara and Skell said that minds clearly thought there was a good chance that he would win, and they never doubted it. So clearly, there's like, they've got some inductive processes that lead them to think within 99.99, however many decimals you want there, percent chance he's going to win. And is this meaningfully different from just having a deterministic system? I'm not convinced it is.
Did you have fun?
I do think it's interesting that the generalist Gurga beat the specialist of the Emperor.
Yeah.
The like game professor who's played many games and played many systems and knows them from a standpoint that doesn't insist on the primacy of one specific thing, was able to deconstruct the system and win.
And also has a better brain.
Nicholsar did ask him like multiple times, like, okay, come on, no, how long have you really been studying and playing this game? And he's like, no, 2 years. Like, no. not possible. And it's like, okay, it makes sense that he's played so many games over so long of a time. Like, there are going to be patterns. There are going to be similarities.
Mhm.
To your question, Dusty, did he have fun? I think he did. Like, it
Mhm.
was the game of his life.
Oh yeah, when he was talking about that game with Nico Sar, he was like, "This man is brilliant and is a genius, and this is like the best conversation I've had in my life."
That's why the determinism of it doesn't really matter. I feel like if I went through a situation, it'd be like, from the start, there was no question of whether or not it will work out for me. It'd be like, I had so much fun, though. That was great.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And thoughts on determinism aside, because, oh boy, do I not think determinism is a problem. Yeah, like, his mind is also just, like, optimally plastic. So, like, yeah, he was only playing for 2 years, but he learned their language in, like, a couple days. So, like, his mind is obviously just better than the people of Azad.
How did you like the assassination attempts that his drug-fueled mind saw intuitively?
Right? Like, so, yeah, he's the product of immense amounts of gene fixing by super intelligences. This is the level playing field.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. This is a little bit of a tangent. I'm reading this like review of Player of Games, and this person basically says that this book is just about a white male colonialist narrative packaged as like a wannabe post-gender in a post-wannabe gender setting, etc. And I distinctly remember there were like multiple times
Berg is
where,
black.
yeah,
Yeah, he's not
he
white.
is not white. And there were
He's
times where,
spiritually white.
Yeah,
I
that's what they're
guess,
implying, I guess.
but I was just like, you kind of missed the point of the book. Maybe I'm missing it, but yeah, I did think it was really interesting when Flammarion
Valerian Saho.
I don't know why I can't get those names. But
They're in
like,
Moraine.
yes, showing Gerge like what the Empire was capable of.
Yeah.
And those people
Mhm.
were described as way more like westernistic than, Gerge. So it was just so interesting where it's like these details that were included about the Empire, and then even in the Azad game about the betting, where it was like every citizen of the Empire is like involved in this game and they can play it, and that's why physical betting was a thing, so that
Mhm.
a poor person can also
Yep.
take part.
Yeah, and like they make much of how this is a meritocratic system, but they
Right.
entirely game the system, right? Like, women are never allowed to succeed at all. Males are not
Right.
allowed
Yeah.
to succeed at all.
Yep.
Oh boy, there's a lot of very political statements I think Banks is making here, and he thinks he's making them very clearly. He
Mhm.
has
yeah.
this idyllic society that's not ours, that's very far from ours, right? And he takes Gerger from it and he puts him in a society where we see a lot of the same problems that we have now, right?
Mhm.
Like, you see the hobo dying on the street because no one
Right.
wants to call an ambulance because then they would have to pay for the ambulance.
Right.
Yep. And we see the dean of the college talking about how penalties and fines and laws are for other people, but for
Right.
us, they only exist so we can have fun breaking them.
Yeah,
Right.
you can just pay the fine. And
Yeah.
you see these soldiers coming back from a foreign war, completely mistreated. And like, it's so infuriating. It makes you so angry.
But that's what's so cathartic about it.
Yeah.
It made
Yeah.
Gerga angry.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And like the idea that this is a white colonialist fantasy, like, I don't know. It to me, it strikes that like the person didn't read the book really, because
Yeah.
a lot of these
Ooh.
are like almost explicitly critiques of Western cultures.
It also, for me, sometimes kind of rings when somebody says stuff like that for something like this. The whole non-intervention in another society when something awful is happening because it's their
Mhm.
society. Leave them alone. And it's like, that's a genocide, bro. That's not really a cultural thing. That's like life and death. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. But they did leave it alone for 76 years because apparently the culture knew any other intervention would have been worse than what they
Yeah.
did.
mhm.
Yeah, you have like Flair Imsaho, like he's not understanding why Gurg is mad about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up. Anybody have any last things they want to say about this book?
Critique of his writing style. Banks, for some, I don't know why, I think he just includes extraneous details that don't matter sometimes. Like the name of the priest that he beat. He doesn't introduce the name of the priest until the second time he plays him. And then he says, whatever the priest's name, the priest who he played previously. And then the next time the priest is mentioned, he says, whatever his name, the priest that he played previously. That seems like just bad writing to me. Like, because the priest's name doesn't matter, obviously. He got through the entire first game without it mattering.
He played two separate priests, though, I think. Or he's
No.
talked about he talked about games of two separate priests, and so at some point he had to talk about the one
think
that
it's
he had
the
played
same.
specifically, and not just the one that he was watching.
I
Oh,
thought
he
so
did
they
talk
were-
about a different game of a different
There
priest
were
or something.
At least two priests, and so
Oh,
that's why
okay.
he had to specify.
I don't think that was necessary at all. He could have said, like, the priest that he had beaten previously, which
Yeah.
he did say that.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't even matter because, like, it's gone so.
That's an editing
Yeah, that
That's
miss.
should be fixed
fair.
in editing. Yes.
Cool.
And like, it doesn't, none of the names of these people matter in the Empire. Right? Like, he'd gone by without naming a single one besides the envoy that he's like tasked with, and Nikosar, and the old advisor guy.
And the judge.
Right.
Yeah, the judge gets named, which
that
I
he
think was
And the
meaningful.
judge and the guy in the exoskeleton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I like exoskeleton guy.
I liked that. Yeah, he was a cool guy.
That was so tragic. That was
Was
a
it,
tragic
though?
moment.
His head exploded.
He still perpetuated a horrible system of exploitation.
He did.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
And he
exactly.
tried not to kill Gurga.
he was trying to really not kill him, and then he didn't have any control.
Yeah,
That's so
this
tragic.
is
That was like turning the tables on what he does to everyone else in the society.
Okay, fine.
Oh.
I thought it was funny.
Same thing to the judge.
When they were, the judge was like,
Yep.
"Oh wait, this is what it looks like when I'm passing sentence on people."
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also the instruments on the island, like the people were trying to impress him, or they're like, "Oh, clearly you're a man of taste, so you can appreciate these horrifying. Like, we make these drums out of a family, and that's why we call like, the skins of the family."
Oh my
And that's why
god,
we
that
call them
was
a family of drums.
terrible.
And then Gurga's like, "Yeah, wow, that's so cool."
I haven't heard something that horrifying since like Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
Right.
very Lovecraftian. Yeah.
Yeah, the debauchery of the society is truly incredible. And it's not even fun debauchery, it's just exploitation debauchery.
Yeah.
Which they think
Oh
is
man,
better.
when they got into the late night
The
stuff,
channels,
I
yeah.
just couldn't. Yeah.
Though
Ugh.
you call it late night stuff, I think it's 24/7 broadcasts.
Okay, I
is.
think you're right. I just, for my brain, I think of it as like everybody else has gone to bed and only the worst of society is. Not that the worst of society is the one that's awake late, but I don't know. It's like, things that you do in the dark. That's
What's
what's
the
my
most
brain.
interesting way we can sodomize these innocents?
It's an interstellar empire. They need to have content available 24/7 for their ruling elite on all planets.
Yeah.
Which means that they have to produce more of it to make it go
Yep.
24/7.
Ugh.
Oh
Yep.
god.
This
So
was a criticism
horrifying.
of Netflix.
But there was an interesting concept that I was like a bit on board with, the labyrinth prison.
The entirely game.
It sounded interesting, but it generally boiled down to rich people can bribe to get
That
out of
is
prison
true.
earlier.
It's
Yeah,
still flawed.
and-
Yes. No.
And there's also just a time limit.
Yes, but I did think that was a very interesting concept.
It was
Yes.
very cool in concept, yes. Like the ostensible meritocracy of this empire. It's like this makes sense on the surface. And then once you dig like immediately past the first layer, it's like, oh, and this is how the rich people exploit the system.
Yes, and everyone knows.
And everyone
Yep.
knows.
My one last thing is something that really stood out to me was when Gurge was talking to the limiting factor like earlier on, like I think it was like his first real game of Azad, where he was just like, is there a way for me to win this game?
Yeah, in his first game.
And all he needed to know was yes and not the how. And he was like,
Yep.
I just needed hope. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
That felt
okay.
Yeah, that was good.
Which is in stark contrast to Marin Skell helping him cheat at the beginning.
Yes.
Yes. Again, he grew up.
He did.
I mean, it's interesting that just the danger of possibly getting caught in cheating ended up with him being in the danger of being assassinated multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And but apparently that's what he needed, and the culture saw that, and they took action.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those special circumstances contact minds. They're a little bit ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing with things that are far below them than ants are to us, right? So
yeah.
But they're ethically aligned, so yeah.
Okay. So we'll all meet up, or at least some of us will meet up next time to talk about Consider Phlebas. To talk with us more about this episode, these books, and our various times with them, you can join us on Discord, or you can definitely talk to Panda on Twitter.
As long as Twitter
As long as
exists.
Twitter
I
exists.
was gonna say.
As long as we are on it. Okay. Thank you, Craig, for loaning us this quarter of his media empire. Thank you, Horizon Brave, for getting us all started. Thank you, my lovely co-hosts this evening, for sharing this time with me and this lovely, lovely book. Our intro and outro music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.